moving on to the GM segment, which has a new name. I'm really excited about this name. It's so much better than anything I was using before. So we're going to move on to this segment, the Front Office Frenzy. The Front Office Frenzy, I was thinking yesterday, I'm like, wow, I was talking so fast, I was so out of breath, I was speeding along, that was very frenzied, and I'm like, well, that's the name right there, Front Office Frenzy. And if you're new, for those of you who are new to the segment that are maybe watching this for the first time, or maybe coming from the 49ers segment that we did yesterday, maybe I can explain a little bit better. It's where I pull a team at random out of this hat that's sitting right next to me, and then I have 15 minutes or less to lay out a reasonable, logical roadmap with minimal information for that specific team, and I have to do this all mostly off the top of my head. I do have notes in front of me. I do have minimal guidelines in front of me to help me kind of guide me through the segment. And at the end of it, I would have to lay out a floor plan, a game plan that would end up with this team in the playoffs contending for a Super Bowl next season. Obviously, as I said, the first episode that we covered was the 49ers, and in this episode, we will be covering, let's see here. This is a smaller one. I could feel it with the piece of paper. This episode, we will be covering, this is actually a pretty good one as well, the Washington football team. This is probably going to be, just off the top of my head, this is going to be a much easier one for me. The Washington football team, it's going to take everything from me, by the way, to not call them the Washington Redskins just out of pure habit. Even though we've had a full season of them being called the football team, I obviously grew up with it being the Redskins. It's going to be difficult for me to avoid saying that, so if I do say that while I'm in this front office frenzy, please do forgive me. There's no timer on the screen, but if any of you at home want to time me, go ahead, start your watches now. First thing that I would do as Washington football team, if I was the general manager of the Washington football team, I would change the name. Make me not say Washington football team for umpteenth millionth time this segment. Make it easier on me. I know that's a decision of owner Dan Schneider, not the general manager. Change the name from the Washington football team to literally anything else, please. So things to know about the Washington football team. Things we know up front. These are my bullet points. Washington football team was 7-9 last season, a playoff team in a horrible NFC East division. Horrible, absolutely horrendous, probably one of the worst divisions ever in the history of the league. Really, really bad. The Washington football team has $35 million in cap space and 8 draft picks. I believe $35 million is about, it's in one of the top brackets of the league in terms of amount of cap space. I'm not sure what exact number it is. I think they might be 6th. I think it's good for 6th highest amount of cap space in the league this offseason. So other than changing the name, I think that the Washington football team is honestly in a really good position to be the front runner of the NFC East for multiple seasons to come, and it's really an easy step forward for me. This is an easier one today for me to decide and move the team forward because they've already got a lot of the intangibles in place. They've already got a lot of great pieces in place, and there's really no controversy. The one thing that the Washington football team needed to do by the end of the season is something that they already did, and that's release Dwayne Haskins, somebody who, you would think that Dwayne Haskins, maybe they'll hold out hope on him that he finally gets his act together and becomes mature, but I think he made it very evident throughout the season and throughout his actions that he was not mature enough to be an NFL starting quarterback, and at that point you need to get rid of him. You can't damage the culture, and I think that if there's one thing that head coach Ron Rivera is all about, it's the culture in the locker room. And a lot of people can argue that the success of the Washington Redskins, and I say success in a weird way because they were only 7-9, but from where they started the season to where they finished the season, you can see that Ron Rivera is clearly establishing a culture in that locker room, and a lot of the success of the 7-9 Washington football team is due to Ron Rivera. What Ron Rivera was able to do with the culture, it was nothing less than impressive, and as well, him beating cancer. He's an extremely likable coach. He's somebody that you would want to play for, and I bet the Carolina Panthers are absolutely kicking themselves that they let him go. So a lot of success in the NFL is between the quarterback and the head coach and the relationship between that. And the Washington Redskins are I did it. I couldn't catch myself. The Washington football team is very fortunate to have probably one of the best head coaches in the league already there. So now you just need a quarterback. And that quarterback was never going to be Dwayne Haskins. But is that quarterback going to be Alex Smith or Taylor Heineke? I don't really know. That's something that we're going to address once we get to the draft section of this segment. But more importanently, let's get to the cap space that they have. The cap space, $35 million. That's a lot of cap space. They have a lot of good developing young players that they don't have to pay just yet. Obviously, chief among them is probably Chase Young, who just finished a probable defensive rookie of the year season. So with $35 million in cap space, you have the capital to go after a big free agent. And I think that if I were the general manager of the Washington football team, I would go after Chris Godwin this offseason. It's not that the Washington wide receiver core is bad. In fact, I like the Washington wide receiver core. They've got some good pieces in McKissick and McLaurin, I think the name is. Obviously, again, folks at home, I don't have time to prepare for this segment. I'm doing this all off the top of my head. They have a really good wide receiver core, but I think I can imagine somebody like Chris Godwin, who is going to be a free agent from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, once the season is over, and especially if he wins a Super Bowl this season, he might be more open to the idea of leaving Tampa Bay, getting a contract in which he is the number one wide receiver instead of the third person on the chain. I think with bringing Antonio Brown in Tampa Bay, it's kind of knocked Godwin down to the third person on the totem pole, and realistically, he has the talent to be the first person on the totem pole and more. So I think Washington, if I was the Washington GM, I would definitely offer a contract to Chris Godwin during the offseason. We're not going to get into specific numbers, but I would pay him. I don't know if I would pay him everything that he's asking for, but I would definitely give him a good asking price. Now, there is something that I do want to say that's coming across my mind now. Deshaun Watson is a reasonable landing spot. It does have a reasonable landing spot in Washington. I would definitely make an offer for Deshaun Watson. If I'm the Washington GM. I forgot to mention that in the 49ers episode as well. I put it in the comment section. I would, if I was the 49ers GM, make an offer for Deshaun Watson as well. But like with the 49ers, I don't know if the Washington Redskins have enough for Watson to want to be able to come here, because again, it's not where Houston wants to trade him. It ends up being where Deshaun Watson wants to go because of his no trade clause. And I don't know with the owner in Dan Schneider that's necessarily somebody that Deshaun Watson wants to play for. That kind of sounds like out of the frying pan into the fire a little bit when it comes to front offices that may exactly not be the best in the NFL. You'd have a great head coach, great defense, so that's obviously attractive for Watson. If I'm Washington's GM, I would offer for Deshaun Watson. I'd try and get picks or send players, whatever I can for him. But if that's not going to happen, and again, it's hard to say whether that's reasonable or not because nobody knows what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson. There's no reports to kind of guide us in a certain direction. We're going to assume that he's not coming to Washington, and with the $35 million in cap space that you would have if you don't sign Watson, I would absolutely go after Chris Godwin. The Washington football team also has an offensive lineman that's really, really good, and I'm blanking on his name right now. Obviously, this is one of the cons of the segment. You can't come up with every name on the spot. He's a really good, I think he's either a right or left guard. Brandon Sheriff, I think his name is. Brandon Sheriff, absolutely re-sign, one of the best linemen in the league. You need to spend your money on the lineman to protect whoever's going to line up behind center. And then Ronald Darby is a free agent as well. That is somebody who you can probably get for cheap. He had a prove-it deal this past season. He had a good season, but maybe not enough to be signed at a really high point in the salary cap. So we'll see. there. So that's like some three really important free agent signings I think the Redskins should go for. Obviously, Godwin is chief number one. I think he fits really good into the Washington football team scheme, and I think he could be a clear number one and a very talented wide receiver for whoever is the quarterback for the Washington football team, which leads me to the draft side of things. The round one pick for the Washington Redskins. I don't know what pick it is exactly. Is it 21? I wish I could check, but I'm low on time. I got to do this in 15 minutes or less. Let's say it's around 21 that the Redskins are picking. I think so. Around pick 21 is when the Washington football team have their first round pick, and I would draft Mack Jones, quarterback out of Alabama, or the best player available with this pick. As I said with the 49ers segment yesterday, with this segment, I'm going to say probably 100 times ad nauseum, depending on what happens with the first 10 picks, because there are so many quarterbacks that could or could not be taken within the first 10 picks. It's hard to say what will happen throughout the rest of the draft. It really depends on those first 10 picks and how many quarterbacks are taken. Regardless, I really like Mack Jones as a quarterback. I think he really impressed with his senior season. He's kind of like Joe Burrow in the sense that he was not on anybody's radar, and then he had a championship winning season, and now he's a top prospect. And I really kind of like that in a quarterback. Somebody who's underrated, somebody who plays with a chip on your shoulder, somebody who's had to fight through adversity and hasn't been a starting quarterback through the entire way. He's not fed with a silver spoon. He's had to fight for what he's been given at University of Alabama, and I really like Mack Jones as a quarterback and his play style. I think it fits the Washington scheme. He's got decent to above average long range accuracy, but his medium and his short passes are absolutely incredible. And just imagine a combination between somebody like Mack Jones and Chris Godwin, and along with McKissick. That would be a really interesting offense to play off of the great defensive line and the great defense that the Washington Redskins had last season. Even if you don't draft Mack Jones, Alex Smith is good enough to lead as a quarterback, but I think Alex Smith is in a lot of ways is going to be more of the, not necessarily a Band-Aid quarterback, but he's going to be the quarterback that carries you into your future. He's older. Obviously, he's coming off a catastrophic injury, and that's great for him, but he doesn't have long left as a starting quarterback. You need to start finding that replacement. I would spend the first round pick on Mack Jones or the best player available, depending on who or how many quarterbacks get drafted in the first 10 picks. Round two. The second round, I would take some kind of either tight end or wide receiver, or I would take a cornerback. Since Ronald Darby is a free agent, Washington could really use another really good cornerback if Ronald Darby does not re-sign, and even if he does re-sign, it would be nice to have another young cornerback, because Darby's only 27. Be nice to have another young cornerback to pair with Ronald Darby. Maybe somebody like a Tyson Campbell out of Georgia, who's slotted to be around a second or third round pick. Or if you want to go offense again, maybe somebody like Brevin Jordan, which is a tight end out of Miami, somebody to pair with Logan Thomas. It's really, for Washington, it's why I said this is so easy. They have a lot of good pieces already. It's really about finding the right pieces and pairing them together to create a really dynamic offense or defense. So Tyson Campbell, cornerback out of Georgia, or Brevin Jordan, tight end out of Miami for the second round pick. The Washington football team has, I think, 2 third-round picks, so I would say draft a running back in the third round. Antonio Gibson did an okay job as the Washington Redskins running back this past season. I did it again. I think that's 3 times. The Washington football team did a good job as their running back this past season, but not an outstanding job. I think Washington needs help at the running back position. I am a huge fan of Javonte Williams coming out of North Carolina. I had the opportunity to watch this guy in person. He's going to be a sleeper pick. He's going to fly under the radar in terms of running backs in this draft. I think if you get him in the third round, it would be an absolute steal. He could be a third round running back, a third down back in the league. Really good. He's a bigger back. He runs hard. He's got some speed to him. Really good pick. I think he'll be a sleeper pick. If the Washington football team can pick him up in the third round and kind of make a dynamic duo in the backfield with Antonio Gibson, that would go a long way for them. I don't know how much time I have, but I think I've covered pretty much everything. So that is how I would turn around the Redskins. Rewind. Either way, stop your stopwatches, ladies and gentlemen. So that is how I would make the Washington football team contenders for the next season. This has been the Front Office Frenzy segment. Tune in next time, or whenever the next time I run this segment is, to see if your team is next. I think that was a pretty logical and reasonably laid out game plan for the Washington football team. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching this segment from the Hard Headed Sports Podcast. You've heard what I've had to say, now I'm interested to hear what you think as well. If you enjoyed this highlight from the show and want to watch more highlights from the show as they come out after the show's completion, you should definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel, and if you're interested in listening to the entire show in its full-length entirety, you should follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all very soon.